All right, so let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION at this hour. The Chinese President Xi Jinping has in fact asserted that his country has not provoked a conflict or a war or has not occupied a single inch of foreign territory. Now, Xi Jinping's remarks in fact have come during a dinner on the sidelines of the APEC summit just hours after his closely watched talks with American President Joe Biden. Listen in.
Throughout the 70 years and more since the founding of the People's Republic, China has not provoked a conflict or war or occupied a single inch of foreign land. Whatever stage of development it may reach, China will never pursue hegemony or expansion and will never impose its will on others. China does not seek spheres of influence and will not fight a cold war or a hot war with anyone.
But not many experts, in fact, agree to Xi Jinping's assertion. They point out that China's expansionism from the East and South China Seas to the Himalayas and Southern Pacific is actually making the Indo-Pacific region pretty unstable. Now, China's aggression has also led to persistent nibbling at its neighbors' border territories. Remember, China has been eating away at its neighbors' borderlands. Now, here's a look at Beijing's territorial overreach. Taiwan has in fact lived for decades under constant threat of an invasion by China. Beijing claims that Taiwan is a renegade part of its own territory and will be seized by force if required. However, many Taiwanese people consider their self-ruled island to be distinct. Beijing's strategy has been to control strategic choke points and to deny access to foreign forces. Xi Jinping recently said that China must in fact modernize its military to make it a great wall of steel. He further added that China must oppose pro-independence and secessionist activities and the external interference. Last year, China's military's Eastern Theater Command had sent over 1,700 aircraft into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. China has also continued to urge grey zone tactics to test Taiwan's response. The grey zone tactics involve sending drones, balloons and fishing boats to areas pretty close to Taiwan. Now, in recent years, the border between China and India has also witnessed a lot of tension. The Chinese aggression has sparked clashes along the mostly rugged mountainous border known as the line of actual control. And amidst Xi Jinping's territorial ambitions, both sides have increasingly militarized their border policies that have shown no indication of backing down. The situation remains pretty tense due to China's violation of norms. Beijing and New Delhi are hardening their positions on either side of the line of actual control. India is pretty firm that peace and tranquility in the border areas is absolutely essential. With defense outposts on artificial islands, China claims almost all of the South China Sea. The South China Sea is a key gateway for a large chunk of the world's merchant shipping. The sea contains rich fishing grounds and reportedly reserves of undiscovered oil and gas. The South China Sea, therefore, is a key economic and strategic subsection of the Indo-Pacific. Lastly, Japan and China are also involved in a dispute over islands in the East China Sea. The disputed islands are known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China. Tokyo has said that the Chinese government did not contest Japan's sovereignty over the Senkaku Islands for 75 long years. That changed, they say, in the 1970s when attention was in fact drawn to the islands due to the potential existence of the oil reserves in the East China Sea. All right, that of course is the context, and also to give us more information, in fact, as to what sense we need to make of the statement by the Chinese president. We're being joined by Professor Miles Yu. He's a professor and a senior fellow and a director of China Center at the Hudson Institute, is in fact joining us in this broadcast. Now, Professor, this is something that is going to be talked a lot. The comment that was made by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, if I can read out to you, he said that China has not provoked a conflict or a war or has occupied a single inch of foreign territory. But the fact is, China has a lot of territorial disputes with other nations and has been pretty belligerent in the last couple of decades. How do we reconcile the statement that the Chinese President Xi Jinping made with the reality on the ground?
Well, thank you for having me. And every aggressor always believes whatever they occupy, they invade, they conquer is rightfully belongs to them. Hitler had the same logic. Right? Every piece of land he conquered in the 30s and 40s belonged to Germany. Russia is doing the same thing because Russia believes that Ukraine should be part of Russia. China follows the same logic of aggression. So in his own conceptual framework, everything China wants, you mentioned very nicely in your leading piece here, South China Sea, Taiwan, part of the India and part of Vietnam, part of Japan, they all should belong to China. So in that sense, in his own logic of aggression, yes, China never wants, never has occupied 1 inch, except other people disagree. So that's basically is a Chinese logic. It's a partly imperialistic. A lot of part of it is basically a communist, revanchist. China wants to restore its past glory. China also believes that if China doesn't conquer the world,
right,
the world will conquer China. So that's why it's very, very aggressive.
All right, very interesting. And also the context in which the Chinese President Xi Jinping made that statement. He was, of course, at the APEC summit. Now, the Chinese and the Americans have had a lot of issues in the last few years. The United States has been involved in quite a few wars. The most recent one, of course, is the war in Ukraine, and the Americans are also arming Israel in its campaign in Gaza. Was the Chinese president taking a pot shot at the Americans?
Well, oddly enough, this the issue of Ukraine and Hamas war on Israel didn't really surface because China and the United States have talked about this over the past year or so repeatedly, and I think the United States has given China the red line repeatedly since Bali and also this March, that the United States absolutely will sanction China if China provides lethal assistance to Russia in the war in Ukraine.
Right.
And China also is warned not to support Iran in the war in the Middle East. So that's why during the summit, the meeting between Biden and Xi,
right,
this issue was not really emphasized, not even mentioned in my view.
All right. My final quick question to you is this. Now, there was another thing that actually grabbed all the headlines when President Joe Biden again referred to the Chinese President Xi Jinping as a dictator. The headline said that the American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has been working behind the scenes, visibly winced when the American President Joe Biden referred to Xi Jinping as a dictator. He's done it again. He's done it before. He's done it again today. What do you think is going to be the impact of this kind of a statement by the American president on the America-China relationship?
I think that President Biden was just confirming what the Chinese constitution says. Article 1 of the Chinese constitution said, China is a socialist country with a dictatorship of proletariat. Xi Jinping is head of that dictatorship. Therefore, he is a constitutionally designated dictator. So there's no sort of a legal issue there. The reason why China acted such a way is because China is very thin-skinned and they cannot really sort of communicated with the international community with candor.
All right. Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Yu, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
You're welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.